A lot of people's perceptions about what it is to be a musician.
Yeah.
Instead of it being that sort of creative thing, which I think later on you begin to discover that's exactly what it's all about. There's a lot of thing of trying to be somebody else, or fitting into a stereotype. You know, what places would you play, type of thing, instead of coming completely left field. I mean, you've been talking a lot about looking at musicians for a new band.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say, you know, with that in mind, about what you see when you're looking at, when you're, you know, auditioning people? What are you getting? Are you getting people that are creative,
or just want to be
somebody
famous?
else?
Yeah.
So recognised.
We get people who want to do something, but they don't really know how to go about it, and they're really looking for a bit of hand-holding, direction, same-minded people who kind of want to do something, but just, you know, how do you do it? What do we do?
Sort of wannabes.
Yeah, well, which is all of us, really, to a certain degree. I think so. We've all got sort of past experiences which makes us either a little bit more savvy or a bit more wise, or but that can equally be as much as a disadvantage as a advantage, I suppose. But out here there's a lot of people that want to do something but don't really quite know how to go about it.
Because we saw some saxophone players last night, didn't we? Doing these sort of amazing arrangements of pieces, and obviously incredibly competent, well, more than competent, really first class players.
Yeah.
And again, it was very laid back and very, you know, slightly shambolic from the point of view of like this. There wasn't a set list.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Not that's anything, but what I was just sort of thinking is that there is a slight mismatch, I think, about technical skill and what it is that makes people really want to see musicians play. That excitement factor can sometimes be sort of lost, can't it, somehow? By the technical expertise of people just staring at a piece of music and playing.
Yeah, I think looking at, or if you use the saxophones as an example, a lot of people won't know the different names of the different saxophones that were being played.
No.
Or, in fact, that it's called a saxophone. Maybe is that a trumpet, or is that a trombone, or that trumpet looks a bit odd, why is that like that? I thought they were straight. Oh, it's a saxophone. Oh, right, okay. So, and that might sound daft, but it is, depending on where in the world you live. Yeah, that is the case. And then to see 4 guys with a selection of saxes to choose from, baritone and an alto and a tenor and a soprano, and the different combinations of saxes and the different kind of sounds, and the harmony that came, which I think we were all quite excited about, was the sort of the very different harmonies that you could get out of those 4, and how big a sound you could get. You can't really beat being in the same room at the same time to see how it's.
No, that's right. But you know, when you look, because we spent a lot of time also looking at some performances done by people on sort of YouTube and what have you, and there is a difference, isn't there, about that performance level when you see a good performance. of people playing, something about their projection, of their mannerisms and stuff like that, which may go a lot further to you liking a piece of, liking a performer than their ability to sing or their ability to play.
Yeah, I think especially when we looked at Prince.
Oh, well.
And
yeah, but that's both, isn't it? Because
yeah.
I mean, but even if you look at, well, I mean, actually, that's quite a good point. I think Prince, because obviously we were watching things with like the rest of his band or something, but certain things that Prince did, especially on the guitar, they're not necessarily that difficult. Not necessarily things that you wouldn't see somebody else do. But the way it's all put together, the way it's presented,
yeah, it just gives a sense of class. I think
yes.
I can only say if you were taking someone out to dinner, and they turn up in, if it's a girl or woman, black dress, diamond necklace, high heels, looking the beers looking really nice. That's adding a sense of class to your meal.
Yes.
Out.
Yes.
If you can have someone turn up in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt and have exactly the same meal, but maybe the entire experience is not quite the same.
No, that's
even though the food is is identical.
Yeah.
So you're kind of dressing up.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I mentioned to you, Mike, about Rory Sutherland, the
yes.
guy who's written books about creative thinking, but in advertising. And he actually uses that point, quoting actually somebody from like the Austrian School of Economics about value. And he talks about restaurants. He said you can have a Michelin star meal, but if the floor hasn't been swept and the place smells rotten, your perception of that
is an average meal.
Well, it's not even an average meal, that it's disgusting. And I think that is the point about getting further up the ladder, whatever that is, let's just put success in in quotation marks, that a lot of this stuff is that it's the thing that goes around the event.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, how does somebody dress when they turn up? What they look like. It changes the meal, right? And also the environment of a restaurant changes the taste of the food that's on the table.
But you also exude more confidence, and that confidence you give out to an audience or someone around a boardroom table or any situation. Actually, you have that interaction, so their perception becomes a different perception, even though it's the same words you're speaking.
Well, one of the things I've always encouraged people to do with singing is that they gesture, because it actually improves their vocal technique. Now, on the surface, that sort of seems slightly ridiculous. But again, we've seen this, where if you get somebody who's just sitting, like for instance, at a keyboard and singing, they're already scrunched up. As soon as they start, if they don't need to play with both hands, but they're just maybe playing some chords with one hand, but they gesture with the other hand, of course, it opens up their chest. So, they're going to have more capacity vocally to sing. Okay, if somebody's singing, playing guitar, you're already quite open. But the point about it is that this, and you see this with great singers anyway, where they mark where they are in the song. Adele does this, doesn't she? But it's that thing of using the body to produce sound and project sound. And the thing about the human body is that lots of things that, like obviously the voice is a great example of this. It's using organs that are not actually foremost about producing sound. It's a secondary function, right? So if you take that sort of route of thinking about how the body is constructed, if you were doing what the human body is designed to do, which is actually to move and to breathe and move, because that breath is the very thing that makes everything happen. It's basically the last thing that happens when you're finishing your life, is that your breathing changes. Your breathing changes to another pattern of breathing. So you get that rattling chain, I think it's called Cheyne-Stokes breathing, where that, you know somebody's dying, they're on their way out. So the breath is the whole thing that's driving the whole system. So the point about that is anything that you do that moves the body, that makes the breathing do something, must change the way the vocal operates. And it also projects that thing out, visually to an audience. And that, it's one of those things that you can you can intellectualize it, but it's not until you actually know it and own it that it transforms people. And I think that's a problem that a lot of people have about being able to be a performer and all this. It's about that ability to project themselves forward. And
because we watched a bit of James Brown as well, didn't we? And
we did.
Yeah, and just obviously he's known for his dancing, and he's done a lot of acrobatic dancing, but the dancing we saw is just all the feet, but it just makes all the difference. And I bet a lot of it helps him with his timing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just.
But if you'd watched that again, that clip, which was back in 1966, wasn't it? It was the Ed Sullivan show. He actually does his twirls and then does the step forward. In time, we've got the dog dreaming here.
Apologies for the dog dreaming noises.
He actually does those as the band hits the stabs and all the rest of it. So everything is coordinated to the music. And of course, he had a fantastic voice as well. We actually forget this because you often associate James Brown to the little sort of punchy lines and stuff. But if you listen to It's a Man's World and stuff like that, and the early James Brown stuff, it's great vocal, and it's him.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think it's anyone else. It's James Brown. He owns that sound. And again, that's the other thing about.
It's his sound.
Yeah, it's owning a sound, isn't it? That's you.
Not trying to be somebody else.
No.
That's the other thing. But
No.
And also, if you're the person being entertained, as such, you're saying, humans don't want a perfectly symmetrical band. They don't want someone that's highly polished to the degree that there's no room for interaction in the band. Because if you take it to its next level, no human being is symmetrical.
No, exactly.
Going to an architecture, people see a classical building and think it's a perfectly symmetrical building. It's not.
No.
There's something that's different. There's something that draws the eye. And that's what being a human being is.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that interaction and you don't look like you're enjoying themselves, how do you expect the audience to interact with you?
I think that's a really good point about symmetry. Because we often think that that's what makes things beautiful, but it isn't. Because you've got the idea of the beauty spot. It's the whole thing that it's asymmetrical. And obviously people understood that. They would artificially put a beauty spot on the face.
Yes.
I mean, okay,
yes.
Some of those things would cover smallpox, yes. But you get the idea that it's asymmetry is important. So therefore, again, if you think about vocals, it's not about things being perfect.
No, it's not.
I don't think it's about things being
not.
Perfect. It's about things sometimes being imperfect that make that work. And I know that's something that a lot of people. Rick Rubin says that sort of stuff about things not being perfect, and that's an important aspect of a performance, right? So I mentioned at the beginning when we started talking about this idea of doing gigs in places that
Yes.
people don't anticipate. Because again, this is sort of like an asymmetry in thinking, because we tend to follow patterns. So you think, well, if you're going to do a gig, it's got to be at a, it's got to be in a hall, it's got to be on a stage, it's got to be a, if it's got a pub in the
Yes.
UK, it's got, it's that sort of thing, or a bar in America or whatever. But why is that? Why do we think like that? Okay, it's habit, but there was a point in time that somebody decided that maybe a good idea to put a band in a pub. Where was that always the way, or who did that? Because if you go back far enough, that probably wasn't happening. Somebody started to do that, but now it's almost like de rigueur. That's where you're going to play, or putting people on a stage. Okay, you get the idea about stage because it means that everybody can see you, but it doesn't mean to say that you have to do that. And if you look at like the Greek amphitheatre, they weren't on the stage; everybody was raised up and looking down.
It's the other way around.
So I'm quite interested in the idea of what places you could play that aren't obvious. So, what ideas?
A garden centre.
A garden centre, that's a good one. A dog's home.
Dogs. Well, it'd be good at the weekend. You get plenty of people come and visit the
kennels.
The kennels. Well, we mentioned prison.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh well, there's some famous gigs in prisons, aren't there? I mean, obviously, Johnny Cash and BB King did one at a sort of a prison, didn't he? So
I wonder if James Brown did one when he was in prison.
Good point.
That would be worth checking that out, wouldn't it?
Yes, I don't know the answer to that one.
Who did San Quentin?
That Johnny Cash, I think.
Was it Johnny Cash in that one? Is that where he was?
I think it was.
Right. I mean, there's loads of bands played in prisons. Because I know that there was a thing of some of the UK prisons, they had people playing.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's one.
I mean, the beach would be good if the weather's good and you can get any kind of power to where you go, or unless you're doing it acoustically.
Well, there was a band. I saw a band on Poleseth Beach once, and this was quite a while ago. So they obviously sorted out stuff about generators. This is before you could use solar power to generate stuff for maybe a PA. I don't know. Yeah, so beach. That's a good one.
We mentioned some
industrial building.
Yeah, industrial
building that's not being used. And
that's a good one. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah. Didn't Pink Floyd play? Is it Pink Floyd? Or is it Jean-Michel Jarre played in? Well, they did Docklands. Jean-Michel Jarre did.
Yes.
And what's the building that's just been completed in? Just on the southern edge of the river in London.
Well, you should be Battersea.
Battersea.
Well, that was, I think,
backdrop.
Pink Floyd did one because they did something with the pig that
flew over Battersea Power Station, and then it crash landed in somewhere in the city and caused havoc.
Oh, okay.
So I remember, they were told off by.
Okay, well, that's
an old industrial building. Good work.
Top of an office block, i.e. Beatles.
Or a redundant office space. There's lots of redundant office space you could use as a temporary venue.
So one of the problems really would be that you need to. I mean, obviously, if you were hiring it, it's not a problem because you're using the space, paying for the space. But of course, if there's a space that people would want a crowd,
because it's good for them as well.
Yeah, then there's a few other ideas, aren't there? So I mentioned an art gallery. Okay, you couldn't do it expecting hundreds, bringing the whole crowd in. But
no.
But if you did that in conjunction with an art exhibition, and it was sort of fairly low key, that could be a really good thing, especially if you were playing something that you could associate with the artwork. You were creating a, but the point about it is like trying to think outside the box about not necessarily doing what people would expect. Now, there are lots of cases of bands that became famous for doing exactly that type of thing. So obviously the Grateful Dead are a good example of that, where it was effectively a happening. But what seems to happen with this is that we fall into a track of thinking until then somebody else comes up with another idea. So obviously the rave thing, where a rave would just happen somewhere, but nobody would know where it was until they followed directions, whatever it was that people used to do. And then suddenly that sort of changed. And you think, right, okay, so what is it about that? Because this idea of trying to affix art to something other than where you'd expect art to be. So like a Banksy, the idea that art could be just on a wall instead of it being in a gallery, seems sort of obvious to us now, but it obviously wasn't obvious at the time.
No.
But I think it's that sort of process of thinking. So I think one of the important things is like, have you got the money to do the thing? In which case, there's all these empty office spaces and all the rest of it. They would be quite happy for you to pay a bit of money to do something.
Yeah, you've got to give them the incentive to let you use it.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a quid pro quo somewhere down the line.
Exactly.
Human nature.
Exactly. Well, that is the point. You have to do that anyway. Unless, of course, there was a space that nobody knew that you were there. Right?
Yeah.
So you could sort of sneak in, do whatever it was happening, bring your crowd in or whatever it was, even if it's a case of you filming the thing and then getting out before anybody knew you were in there. So that's an interesting thing. So what other places? Railway stations. But they've started doing their stuff with pianos.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. But you could see that there are a lot of possibilities. Now, it's quite obvious that you could think of an idea like that, and then something will come along that could scupper that because there's some legal aspect that you can't do that.
Safety issue.
However, when we were mentioning this, because I said about the book, every time I ran into a problem or somebody did something that I didn't quite like, in the past I would just say, well, I don't like that, and go away and fix the thing. I didn't do that. I just sort of looked at that idea and then said, I like that. However, is it possible?
Yeah.
And then I gave it back to them, and then they come back with something else, which was nothing to do with what I'd originally intended at all. Because I'd not said I would rather that you did this, because that was my original idea. But I sort of encouraged them to develop something that they were already thinking about. And in every case, and there were several, it was actually the outline of the book, the internal spacing of the book, stuff about the print on the inside. And in every case, it came back with something that was startlingly better than I'd anticipated. Now, going back to the thing about when you run into a problem, like, say, for instance, you think, you could play in a railway station.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, we can't do that because of the transport and, act of such and such, whatever it is, we can't. But if you looked at that and thought, well, hang on a minute, what if that, you don't look at it as a problem, you look at it as an opportunity for rethinking what you're doing. You could come up with something else. I don't know what that is, but I'm just saying, instead of just going and disregarding it completely.
Obstacles aren't always problems.
Well, they're not.
They're generators.
Sometimes obstacles can be a great backdrop to something else.
And they can be generators of other ideas.
And they can be generators of other ideas. So again, going back to this Rory Sutherland thing, is he comes up with this quote, which is similar to my, the NLP thing about it doesn't matter if it works or not. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Does it work? which is the opposite of a bad idea. No, what is it? The opposite of a good idea is often another good idea. Because we often think that something, if you take the opposite of a really good idea, it must be a really crap idea. But it isn't. It's just another good idea, potentially. So again, if you run into a problem, that problem could become another good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's often the case, subliminally, you don't know that that's actually happening. It's not. You don't rationalise it in that way.
No.
Because, you just don't. So you just say, well, this has happened. You can't change that, but what can we do with it?
Yeah.
And then you arrive at a different place than when you started. And a lot of the times it's a better place than you imagined it would be.
Well, ironically, it's a little bit like Cut Up, isn't it? Because you were talking about working with these kids and doing this amazing thing, the album that you did with all these school kids. Terrific sort of musical idea with all these kids singing their hearts out. And they sound terrific on there. But you use Cut Up to get the lyrics.
Yeah.
So really, like when you get ideas like this, it is a little bit like Cut Up, where it's like, we'll take this sort of crazy idea about, whatever he's playing in a prison, and then you're mixing it with the idea that there's a rock band in a prison or whatever. It's the same principle of taking things that you wouldn't necessarily put together in the same place, right? So, because a lot of this that we're talking about is actually to do with ideas that we're generating for Bluescamp. About, could we create an environment for people to play in places that are unexpected? Is that a possibility that we could put something together that's on like a one-day thing where we get people in, write a song, perform it, that type of thing?
It'd be unique, because they would never have the opportunity to do that again, probably.
Yeah.
So it's a unique thing you're performing.
Or even just get in, set the PA up and a light rig, do the gig, film it, do the social media stuff and all the rest of it. That's what you're doing. Yeah. So in other words, the performance is actually the beginning of a whole bunch of other things. Instead of it being the end point.
Instead of the culmination,
it's the starting point.
Catalyst for everything.
Yeah. So in other words, you're reversing
your
perspective of what, again, back to this idea of what people think a performance is about. Because going back to the Prince film, the footage of Prince playing wherever that is, whether it's I think it was the Brit Awards we were watching, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Probably more people have seen that after the event, obviously, because it's been on the TV, been on YouTube for however many years, than saw it originally. So that's a really good example of that was the starting point of those of that was the actual performance, and what followed on afterwards is the fact that people are still watching it now. Right.
So when you're looking, Chris, for say some singers, backing singers, sometimes the people that really want to do it above anything else are not necessarily the people you want. You want people that have done other things and have other aspects to themselves than just wanting to sing, just wanting to be in a band. And it was the same in my business, that I didn't want a guy coming, or a person coming out of architecture college with a first wanting to, I'm going to be the best at this. I wanted someone that had done other things and got a different perspective on something, so they could bring something else to the table.
Yeah.
And they were often the better people to have on your team. And a band is a team. You have to have a certain discipline, not in a hierarchical thing, but there has to be a structure with it.
Yeah, I think especially if you're dealing with situations where you're dealing with human beings, a lot, and the people that work with you need to be very personable and be able to communicate with other people, rather than purely just being the genius, the supposed genius who's amazing, but can't actually converse properly with somebody, and therefore isn't actually that useful. And it's the same with musicians. I'm sure we've all played with people that are just, phenomenal players.
They don't form a band.
But nightmare to speak to, or communicate with, or have dinner with, or organisationally, or just everything else seems to fall apart, and then you end up thinking, actually, I'd rather have someone who's not quite as an amazing technician
every time,
but at least I can have a beer with them. And
well, every time, because everyone's got to feel they add value. You don't want anyone in there that feels their baggage.
Yeah,
everyone has to add value to something, and you could have, Vic, you probably knows more than anyone, that you could have 4 great players, but it doesn't make a band. It's all fighting each other.
I can give you an example of that, because I was in a band exactly like that.
All right.
So after I had that car crash in 1990, whatever it is, 1990, wasn't it? I think sort of Red Touch had sort of wasn't quite no, it wasn't. When was that? Yeah, it was something. So I was sort of recovering because I broke a load of bones in my hand and fractured my sternum and all the rest of it. And I'd lost a lot of the power in my left hand. To be honest, I mean, it wasn't really too much of a problem, but it was not what I was used to, because I think generally speaking, my hands were as strong as any other person, but to me it wasn't the same. So what happened was I got involved in a sort of like a blues rock band for a while, and the band was amazing on paper, right? But it just chemically didn't work. It just was ridiculous. And it sort of felt really odd. So there's another really good guitar player. Grant was playing bass. So and the thing was, it was people that you knew that you got on with, but there was something dysfunctional within the whole setup. So we did a couple of gigs and we just gave up, because it was just like, I can't be bothered. It just didn't feel right. So that was a good one,
Yeah.
I heard a very apparently it's a famous quote from an ex-Manchester United manager. Is it Brian Clough?
Oh no,
he was Derby
Alex
County.
Ferguson.
No, I got a feeling it is a Clough quote, because it's about on paper.
Yeah, he says we played the game, and on paper we had an amazing team, but unfortunately the match was played on grass. Yeah,
that was a Clough. That was a Clough quote.
Yes. And I suppose you
Brilliant
can apply
quote.
that, especially.
Yes.
You can have the most amazing group playing, but actually on paper, but
the
performance is played on a stage.
Exactly,
So,
and it's about people interacting and the chemistry between people.
Yes.
So that's quite, so these are things that we're sort of teasing out with regard to, what we could maybe do with Bluescamp. So it's this thing about changing people's perspective about what it is to be in a band, or what it is to perform, where you can perform, and all the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, have we got any other things we could throw in the mix with regard to like places to play, or before we move on to something else that I've got in my head?
Yeah, I mean, on the same line, we talked about trying to find musicians.
Yeah.
And we spoke about,
one, yeah.
rather than going to the, musicians available Facebook page, you could try somewhere else. So, which I'm looking into, and I've had some little flyers printed. and I'm just going to hand them out to the people that go to the gym that I go to, because it's quite a big gym and there's a lot of people in there, and there's got to be some musos amongst them somewhere.
Yes,
but it's not the obvious place.
No, and there's an interesting psychological aspect of that.
It's in plain sight.
Because the people that go to a gym are obviously trying to better themselves in some way, shape or form. So they've got a thing of adhering to a program of stuff. And of course, that is exactly the mentality of musicians who practice.
There's self-motivation. You
have to practice, and it's consistent. You're going to have to be doing this over a long period of time on a regular basis. Which again is the same format if you're training in a gym. Now, that's not necessarily to say that everybody, but if you do have somebody who is, and let's face it, there's a lot of girls, lots of women who can sing and who want to sing as well, because that's always been the thing, isn't it? Like in schools, if you do music, if you do singing lessons, well, I would say like 95% of what you get are female. Don't get many guys coming in for singing lessons. So that either means that the girls are.
It's interesting. Why?
No, this is what I'm saying.
Sorry,
yeah. Why is that? And I think that's because maybe they want that more than the guys. What is it the guys want to do? If they're going to play music, they're probably going to play an instrument. Even if they sing, they might be playing guitar as well, or keyboards or something. I don't know. It's one of those things you look at and you think, well, is it in the mind of most people that it's okay to be a female vocalist?
Yeah.
And not play a musical instrument? That's not to say that they don't, but you understand what I'm saying. But is it okay for a guy to be a vocalist, or is it that they're playing a musical instrument and they become a vocalist?
It's a preconditioned view of how things should be sometimes.
Well, I'm just wondering whether that is what it is.
Yeah.
And it takes somebody that becomes an icon that means that you can do that. I can do this because back in the day it would have been Elvis or whatever. At some point in time it might have been David Bowie, but of course obviously Bowie could play loads of instruments, and so could James Brown.
Well, 9 times out of 10 Bowie always had a guitar, even if it's slung on his back when he sang.
Well, certainly the early stuff. Yeah. Sort of, Spiders from Mars and all that sort of stuff. But it's that perception that people have that you can do this or whatever. So I don't know how we got onto that one. You were talking about. Oh yeah, originally you said about selecting people for a band, right? And you sort of asked a question, but you didn't really get a chance to answer it. What do you find when you get people to come for auditioning?
Well, in terms of, are you saying what makes you decide, what makes you like a particular person?
Yeah, what sort of people turn up?
Yeah, we just get all sorts. And you have to be, I think you have to be very careful to not read a book by its cover, and to give people a chance to really let them show what they can do. Because if the I can simply say if the shoe was on the other foot and I turned up somewhere to audition, just that particular moment in time might not be your absolute best moment of time. Might just not be in the mood for what it is, an arty type of thing. So you can if you think that maybe someone's got it seems interesting, then I think definitely you have to see them a second time and then maybe a third time, and base it on that rather than just in you come, do something. Is that a yes or no? unless you've got 100 people queuing outside the door waiting to come in. But once someone either opens their mouth to sing or play something, I think you pretty much know very quickly whether they've hit the mark for that initial, before you delve to the next level.
That's interesting, because if you go on the basis, because all your senses come into play when you see someone walk through a door. Okay, so how about like a blind audition where you don't even see the person that's singing to you?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a TV program that does that, obviously, but because you have a perception of that voice should come from that sort of person sometimes. You're pretty good. So if you don't see them, you don't know them, and you hear the voice, you're just taking that voice, think that works or that doesn't work, and then you go on to the next thing. So you've crossed one of the barriers. Then you've not eliminated it, but you're then not perceiving them from the other direction. So you're not saying, I don't think it's the way you walked in the door, even if you have got a good voice, will work. So you're looking at the voice is great, right? I know that bit will work. Let's see how the other. So it's a reverse way of looking at it, and I think that's quite an interesting way.
And I think if people can always do the basics well, then your eyes and ears are open to okay, what's next? Whether it's a drummer just playing a simple pattern using bass drum snare and a hi-hat, and it's pretty rock solid.
In time,
doesn't have to play anything else, not touching the toms, no fills, no anything. You think, well, that's a starting point. Same sort of thing with a bass player.
He's grounded. He's got the basics. He knows he's done his.
You don't have to hear Bach's Preludes and Fugues played on bass to be impressed. And so it's difficult. It is quite difficult, and sometimes you think you've chosen someone brilliant, and it turns out that for whatever reason you don't get on, or you start to clash with styles. I think it's really important to dig around background and make sure that in the future you're singing off the same hymn sheet in terms of what you want to do. Otherwise, it just doesn't matter who turns up. You want a road to nowhere. If you auditioned Prince and to play guitar, and you think, oh God, it's amazing, it's fantastic, and then you find out, or he finds out later, that actually you're heading towards a bit of a metal band, and he's not interested. Well, it didn't really matter how good he was, does it? It's not going to work.
Yes.
And rate of work rate as well. I see a lot of people clash in terms of what's expected. People are very defensive in terms of I can't. I find that is the first thing that comes up is a list of reasons why someone can't do something. Just so you know, I can't do it then. I can't do this. I can't rehearse all the time. I can't. And you kind of I get that, but I don't actually want to hear it. I want to hear some positives. And I don't think anyone in their right mind expects people to be available all the time and at a drop of a notice. And then we all know we've all got families and issues and money to earn and bills to pay and all the rest of it.
But if that's the case, don't go into it in the first place.
In the first place, yeah.
Well, I think that's important, because again, if you think about something adjacent to that, not to do with music, like football or something like that, you couldn't, if you got selected to play for somebody, you can't say, well, I won't be able to do
Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock.
Can I just play the first half? Cause
exactly. And I've got to do this and blah, blah, blah. You couldn't do it, could you? So and also, people who wanted to do that, wanted to play, they would want to play so much, at football or whatever, that they just have to. Everything has to work around that.
Oh yeah.
So, no, I know you're not saying that, but if you had a really good band that started to do some amazing things, then sometimes that just becomes part and parcel of the fact that people that have to adapt because, what they're doing is worth adapting for.
Yeah.
And other people suddenly just think, well, I can't do this. So you have to replace them.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Not at all, because what happens is that you have a responsibility to the other people in the band.
Yeah.
And you don't want to build up resentment.
No.
Oh, it hasn't turned up again. An hour late. Well, I've been here since. I've got it all set up. I've got it all ready. I'm just sitting around. And then you get that resentment, and it spills over, and it's not good for the whole.
Yeah.
The band. So
I think that's a really good point.
It's a difficult one.
I think some people do forget that it's a group effort.
It's a group effort.
And you can't just dip out of it.
No.
Because
it's not you're hurting.
If you're in a ship and there are 5 places it was leaking and you all stick your fingers, 5 of you that all stick a finger in, you can't have one person say, I'll just take my finger out because it'll be all right, there's still 4 of you. Ship's still going to sink.
So here's a good example of that, actually, isn't there? We know when you're packing away at a gig. And you know what I'm going to say.
Yes,
you know what I'm going to say.
Oh.
Who's the person to leave?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. No. We don't have to say, do we?
No, we don't have to say, but it's obvious because they don't have to pack much away. No. So you think, well, that's not good enough, is it? No. And okay.
Who's the last to arrive?
You are the last person.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah. And the last person who's going to leave is obviously going to be the drummer because he's got more to pack away.
Yeah.
Or whoever's got the PA.
Yeah.
And you think, well, all of this stuff, even if you've only got a couple of things to pack away.
The rest of it doesn't do itself.
It doesn't do itself, no. And I think that's the thing. Okay, fair enough. Sometimes somebody ends up talking a lot to other people because that's all part and parcel.
Yeah.
But that's, again...
But they're still in the building, aren't they? They're still there.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing their thing.
It's
part of what's necessary for communicating with an audience and all the rest of it. But you see it, don't you? You see it a lot, and it seems to be that those people seem to be unaware of how irritating that is.
Yeah. To
everyone else, and all that needs to be done is that those people just need to help somebody else pack something away.
Yeah.
Carry a few things.
I think you could literally write a book on that subject.
Or, in case of open the door for you so you can get the stuff out and you'd have to put everything. Just be part of the process.
Yeah.
Don't say, well, I'm off now. I'll see you guys next time.
I think the same person who leaves at first also often asks for a lift because they're not driving.
Okay.
Just throwing that one in there.
That's really rubbing salt in the wound as well. But
I think, we've all suffered with that, I think. And we've all suffered with, hold on, I'm the oldest bloke here and I'm lifting everything.
Yeah.
And that's that sort of thing.
Oh, here's another thing. You saying that, the sparked a thought. So that's a really good one. Yeah. This stuff, now, people in the past, because I've heard this, that's a young guy's game type of thing. And now I'm saying, no, it's not actually. Because I think actually playing in a band is actually probably an older person's game.
Yeah.
Because the demographic has changed so much that maybe younger people aren't involved. Obviously, there are people involved in music, I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of things going on there where a lot of people who would have gone in and played guitar or drums, whatever, they might be DJing. They might be involved in something, but it won't be what you'd necessarily it's in a band, right? They're going down another sort of artistic musical thing that's not necessarily to do that. Now, that's not so much the case of older people DJing,
not
right?
at all.
So, and as you know, there are lots of very famous musicians who are really clocking up the miles, right?
That's right.
Clocking up the years, but so you sort of think, well, that's interesting. And again, we know lots of people that we've encouraged to play, and they're playing in bands, and they're certainly contemporary with us.
Yeah.
And there's no end in sight for those people because they don't want to stop. They've no need to stop.
No.
They're going to carry on playing until they can't
Drop.
play. Until they drop. Exactly.
The after the gigs thing's interesting because now, as a band, we all know what we do when it finishes. So we actually get packed up pretty quickly. Everyone's got their bits they do with the PA, wired up. Someone makes sure the cables are reeled properly, not thrown in a... So subsequently we get cleared up pretty quickly now because everyone knows their position. And then you clear your own stuff up. You get the major stuff out of the way. And if we cleared all that, we help the drummer, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Get his stuff in. And everyone's... Then there's no... Oh, it's all right. You don't get that animosity building up. Once, in a band situation, once there's a certain amount of resentment and animosity, you're dead in the water, I think.
Yes.
And because you just don't get rid of that angst out of it.
Right.
So, if you can get to that point, then that's a good place to be. I mean, it's even better to go to places where you haven't got to lug a PA because it's already there, and that makes a load of difference. But, everyone's got to be... what I'm saying is everyone's responsible to everybody else. It's collective. It's a collective thing and not a alpha male prima donna thing. If you've got prima donnas in it, it doesn't... I mean, when you get to a certain level, like the Police, there was Copeland and Sting, both alpha males used to fight like hell, but put them on stage, bang, there's a formula that worked. But it was never going to last.
Well, it lasted long enough, didn't it?
Lasted long enough, but there was going to be an explosion.
But they had a road crew. So if they didn't have a road crew, they wouldn't have lasted anywhere near that amount of time because it would have been just a complete nightmare. And again, so I think, again, this ties what we were saying before about that all the other stuff other than the musicality.
Yes, all the other stuff that goes with it. Because if that all works all right, the musicality will come together.
The point is that when you create music with other people, you always end up with something. Whatever that something is. You can always create something with that. Right? Now, again, that gets missed. And there's certain people, certain types of characters that I've seen over and over again who seem to be blissfully unaware that their behaviour not only causes problems with one person, other person in the band, but the entire band.
Yeah.
And not only that, an audience could see it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And they are totally unaware that it's them. It's like we've often said when you're in a room and there's always one person in a crowd, you think, oh God, there he is, or there she is. The person is a complete and utter pain in the arse. And it doesn't take very long for those people to become quite evident.
They're pretty evident.
Right. And I've always said to you, if you can't find that person, it might be you in a room, right? Now, this is the thing in a band, is that if you're not aware that could happen, you don't even know that it could be you. And that's what I see when you get somebody who's a disruptive influence.
Yeah.
So we've had it over the years. We've had a few people over the years I can think of that were really disruptive people. They just turn up, they might turn up for a couple of years or whatever. And you always realise that you're trying to ring fence certain aspects of their behaviour so that, it's not too problematic to everybody else. And then after a while you just think, well, if they don't get this, you need to just not let them, And they might be quite good. They might be quite good players, but...
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't make any difference.
No. It doesn't matter.
And it's a personality thing. It's not their ability to play. So again, we're back to that thing about...
Is it right for the band? Is the person you choose has got to be right for the fix.
It's got to be a fit, hasn't it?
It's got to be a fit, yes. The old days, square peg in a round hole, all those sorts of things are absolutely true.
Well, in actual fact, you see, in these instances, sometimes you do think that the solution to the problem will be to get a square peg
and back it through
and put it into a small hole in order to because you feel like that. Because some people you just think, oh my God, this person just needs something happening to them. Because you can't. We've had people walk out of rooms and go and take something to ease the pain of their dealing with somebody else. There has been. Anyway, that's just another story. But we've had a couple of people like that. But anyway, and also I never think those people ever get anywhere, do they?
No, because they don't change.
No. And there's always this idea that, the diva who acts like that, it's like it's par for the course, and I think it's not. It's nonsense. I don't think that works. I mean, a lot of people become like that when they're actually really quite successful, because they start believing their own publicity. But in the early stages, I think if you see people like that, they're never going to get anywhere.
No.
Right.
No.
I mean, I could be proven wrong, but
no, I think you're right.
I'm just thinking, because I did read something a little while ago about the problem that Steven Spielberg had with an actress who started to play up, right?
Okay.
And you sort of think, well, did that affect their career? And I think actually it probably did, because it was one of these people that they were there, in lots of different films, and then after this particular film, it's like, you didn't see them that often after that. So I'm not saying there's just that one incident. I'm just saying if that starts to become cumulative, in the end you think, well,
producer doesn't want that.
No, they don't want to work with them again.
No,
right?
No point.
No, because when you start looking for people and you think, oh, we don't want her, we don't want. It was actually Julian Roberts. Actually, who started to become a complete pain, apparently, and that might be because she was going through a lot of difficult things, but to suddenly disappear in the middle of a film, which is what she did.
Okay.
And they were trying to work out how they were going to refilm all of her parts in this film, because she just suddenly disappeared.
Off,
yeah. And then they managed to get her back in, and whatever it was that they had to do to placate her. It's not because they'd fallen out. It was just something was going on.
Yeah.
And her reaction was, well, I'm off. Thank you very much. So it's slightly strange. And again, if you see that going on with musicians, you don't last very long, do you?
No.
You might get one gig, but you won't be asked. Yeah. You won't be asked.
No. It's funny. I was just thinking about people's availability. We touched on it earlier. And I always have my heart in my mouth now when you say, "Oh, when do you think you'd be able to come in and, rehearse or practice or record?" And the new drummer that I'm working with, this happened last week, and it was just such blue sky afterwards. Because that was said to him, and he said, "Well, I'm finished work early today. I can be round in about 3 hours." Oh, so it's like, my God, this is a revelation. And he turned up 3 hours later, and he doesn't go anywhere without a bag of cymbals, sticks, and in his car. And the kit was all here and all set up, and he just came in and we chatted and we listened, and then he played and then he practiced and then we recorded, and it was job done. You just think, how easy is that? How easy was that? And that's the kind of feeling you want to go away with, because it can be really, really easy. It doesn't have to be.
And that transfers to all walks of life.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same
as we know.
It's with some people you can't teach, because they're just not at the lesson for whatever reason. Yeah. Consistently.
Yes.
Week after week after week after week after week. And then they're not very happy because they're not really making a lot of progress, and then you just want to shoot them in the head because they've not actually had any lessons over the last
No.
3 months, and the 3 or 4 that they did have were so sporadic that all you've done is repeat the first lesson again and again.
Because there's been so long in between.
And sometimes when you play with other musicians, it becomes a bit like that. You don't actually make any progress.
Yes.
And they don't really. The worst thing is they don't really realise it's their fault. And there's every excuse, but I couldn't, and I was doing this, and then that happened, and it's just not my fault. I can't even think. Well,
yeah, I mean, yes,
you
you're
weren't
right.
there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, from my perspective, we often meet every week, even if it's only for an hour.
Yeah.
Just perhaps talk something through, or to play the beginning of that or the end of that, and see how we. And it might only be for that period of time. And our singer has been travelling down from Crystal Palace to Hadlow for rehearsals on a Thursday night. Hardly ever misses one. You can't
fault that.
You can't fault that.
Yeah.
You can't fault that dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, cool. That's good. Thanks, guys.
Right, open the wine.